Boys and girls, this story shows us that prayer is important. And it also shows us that prayer is the right response when we feel angry and sad. It's important that we do understand that God doesn't always give us what we want, even if we pray really hard for it. But what we need to remember is that God always answers prayer. So it may not always be what we have prayed for, when we want it, what we want, but it's always answered. God either answers our prayer with a yes, with a no, or maybe even with a wait. Hannah knew that God was in control all the time. He was the one that had prevented her from having a child for so many years. And it was in his good timing that God did give Hannah a son, Samuel. Do you think that if God had given Hannah a son earlier, do you think that she would have promised to give her son to God? Perhaps not. So boys and girls, God chose not to answer that prayer of Hannah's for a very long time. He waited until she was desperate enough to promise to dedicate him to God. And it is because of this promise that Hannah made to God, and because of God's timing in answering her prayer, that God was able to bless not just Hannah, but also the nation of Israel with Samuel. Samuel was going to grow up to be a great prophet and priest. Like I said earlier, this means that God had planned to use Samuel to speak for God to his people. Samuel was part of God's great plan to lead his people through a very difficult time in their history. Samuel's life also points us forward to Jesus. Do you see that? Just as God was going to lead Israel through a very difficult part of their lives through Samuel, in an even greater way, through Jesus, God is guiding and directing us through the difficult and challenging parts of our life here on earth. In Samuel, God provided a leader, a rescuer. But in Jesus, boys and girls, God has provided us with so much more. Boys and girls, this week I want you to focus on praying. Will you keep coming to God in prayer like Hannah did? And will you trust God to answer your prayers in his good time and according to his good plan? And will you never give up coming before God in prayer? I can't wait to see all that we are going to learn from this amazing book in 1 Samuel. See you next week.